Yes! This is what I've been waiting for this entire time. Finally! Not that I would recommend it. However, if you absolutely must revitalize a franchise from decades and decades ago, this show is a really, really, really good example to follow. Let's just hope that if they keep going with the show that they don't have 7 really, really, really good seasons followed by an 8th season that craps the bed and is shorter and shittier than anything else from the show. So, here's hoping. What's up, guys? How's it going? How's everyone doing today? Welcome back. So it's here, it's time. The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance is finally upon us. And I don't know if you guys could tell by my enthusiasm, but I really love the show. And after sitting through 10 hours of this fictional world, you know what? I'm ready to pretty much just say f*** reality. Because I would much rather live in this fictional world where humans don't even really exist, as opposed to living here in the real world where, you know, we all gotta pay bills and shit. And yeah, there probably is a lot of death and destruction waiting for me or just lurking around the corner, on top of there being probably a lot of just random creatures with the ability to bite my face off in about 2 seconds. But on the flip side, there would be no shortage of things to do or things to look at, so you know what? Worth it. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the world of the Dark Crystal, it basically takes place in this kind of fictional realm that's called Thra. And in this so-called realm, there are 2 main classes of people. One is called the Skeksis, and the other are called Gelflings. There's a few other species, but those are the main 2 that you're going to focus on. The Gelflings are these elf-like creatures that are probably the most populous, and they kind of swear fealty to the Skeksis. And the Skeksis are basically these like old decrepit beings that have kind of assumed power over everything, and they kind of use the artifact known as the Dark Crystal to achieve this power and also to kind of achieve immortality, and through that they do a lot of nefarious things. And in turn, those nefarious things cause something called the Darkening, which it's basically a plague on the soil, like just the land in general, which in turn affects all the life in the world of Thra, and a bunch of fantasy stuff starts happening. And the show basically just follows a few characters as they're kind of sowing the seeds of a rebellion. And I personally think that they did a wonderful job in constructing the timeline for this show. Mainly because there isn't an exact timeline, and I thought that was brilliant because if you've seen the original Dark Crystal movie, you kind of know what happens for the most part. However, in the show, they neglect to tell you exactly how far in the past this whole story takes place. So you may know what happens way down the line, but you don't know when or how it happens. Therefore, hypothetically, we could get 15 more seasons of this shit, and I would watch every single one of them. With the exception of a couple things, this show was literally almost everything that I wanted it to be after seeing the trailer initially. One of the problems I have, and it's a really small one, you see it in a whole bunch of other movies and TV shows, so it's nothing really new, but it's that thing where a character is in danger and either there's a creature going after them and they start growling just to, you know, give the character some time to run away, or there's a scene where a villainous character starts like monologuing or something. Basically anything for an antagonistic character to give the protagonistic character time to run away or fight back or do whatever they need to do. It didn't happen very often, but it did take away from the intensity just a little bit in certain scenes. And as far as the ending of the show, without ruining anything, I liked exactly where they ended up because it left a few unanswered questions. While meanwhile, it still gave you a satisfying enough ending so that you feel like you've seen a full story. However, even if the very end was good, I really didn't like how the last episode was handled. Because in the last episode, the scope of the show, it just didn't feel as vast as the rest of the show kind of set it up to be. It just felt a little bit smaller, and it kind of like, it felt like it crapped out a little. It made sense for the story, but if I was the writer, I would have messed around with that episode a little more. Besides that, this show is fucking incredible. The show really, really, really does stay true to the original movie, but at the same time, it gives you kind of like the scope and the stakes of like a Lord of the Rings, so it feels like this gigantic epic thing. And luckily for the show, the original movie was so vague in the way that it explained a lot of things that it gave them so much room to play with, so that they were allowed to be, you know, way more creative than maybe some other shows that have like set up this very, very strict mythology. I have also heard a few people compare this show to Game of Thrones, and I find that wildly inaccurate. Because aside from the fact that it's a fantasy show and there's a lot of different factions that are, you know, you're trying to figure out what the political ramifications are between them, I don't really see a whole lot of similarities. Because in Game of Thrones, there's a lot of different characters with a lot of different motivations, and granted, there is some wiggle room with that as far as this show goes, but in this show, it's very, very evident that the Skeksis are the bad guys and the Gelflings are, for the most part, the good guys. Obviously, if you have a lot of characters, though, there is a lot of leeway for as far as some of the characters' motivations, but for the most part, you can kind of tell the good guys from the bad guys pretty easily. Besides that, I thought the music in the show was really good. They kept some of the themes from the original, but they tried to make some of their own little ditties here and there, and it wasn't always overpowering either. Sometimes it was very, like, atmospheric. Like, there's one scene where a couple of Skeksis are talking, and it's literally just, like, 2 violins playing really gross notes, and I thought that really set the tone for the evil conversation that was happening, and there was a bunch of that peppered throughout the show. And as far as the voice cast, I don't think they could have gotten a better group of people to portray all these characters. I think out of all of them, Taron Egerton is probably the most star-powered out of all of them, so it's possible that they could have found somebody a little bit better because he's not really a voice actor, but at the same time, he still did a really, really good job with what he had to work with. The only way it could have been better is if they got Kevin Conroy from the Batman animated series. That would have made it better. But as it stands, he wouldn't have made it that much better because the cast is already awesome, because you got Mark Hamill and Jason Isaacs, and that's already a big win. But aside from that, you got a few Game of Thrones actors that are in there. You got Mark Strong, Keegan-Michael Key was in there, Eddie Izzard was in there. It's basically just a murderer's row of voice acting. And as far as the pacing of the show, I thought it was very, very well paced because they didn't throw all their eggs into one basket. And by that I mean they didn't start the show off with, oh, it's a period of unrest and there's a rebellion happening. Like, no, they introduced you to all these characters first, and then you had a little bit of time to spend with them so you can develop them and get to know them and start to care about them before certain sequences of events start happening, and then you really, really, really get into the meat of the show about the fact that the Skeksis are really these not cool dudes that are ruling over the land. And the last thing I'll talk about is the absolute obvious. The visuals on this show are some of the best things I have ever seen on screen. And this show really did take pride in the fact that they were trying to go as much practical effects as they possibly could. And there are some brilliant creature designs throughout the show. It's like I said, I would much rather live in this world than our boring reality. And they kept some of the older species that they had from the film, like the podlings and the landstriders, and they also came up with a bunch of new things. And also, the CGI wasn't overbearing like I thought it could possibly be. Because it's like I said, they went as practical as possible, as much as possible, but they put CGI in when it was appropriate, because some things, like puppets, they do give you some limitations as far as mobility, but at no point was I distracted with the amount of CGI that you saw in the background. But anyway, guys, I can't wait to watch this show again. I'm so happy that this came out, like, you guys have no idea. Couple small issues overall, but the show was pretty much everything I wanted and more. So that being said, I think for a score, I'm out of 10, I think I'm gonna give it like a 9.6. I can't wait for season 2. I thought they ended this season on a very perfect note, and most likely I'll probably end up making a spoiler video for the show because, honestly, because I fucking feel like it. But anyway, guys, those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Have you guys seen the show? Were you excited like I was? Hop in the comments, let me know what's up. Besides that, give me a like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, do all that other YouTube-y type of shit, and I will catch you guys next time.